Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire. This is the follow-up to the very successful film released in 2021, Godzilla vs. Kong, and this film once again is directed by Adam Wingard. And in this film we follow Kong in Hollow Earth, where he's feeling a bit down in the dumps lately, since he's so alone. But through a series of events he travels deeper into Hollow Earth, where he discovers a tribe of great apes led by their tyrant leader, Scar King, who plans to attack the surface world. Due to these unfortunate events, Kong is forced to team up with once enemy Godzilla, as the two of them must stop Scar King from reaching the surface and starting a brand new ice age. That's all I'm gonna say without spoiling this movie, but Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire. This is an interesting one from a perspective. I don't really know how to talk about this movie from a more critical point of view, because I'm just gonna say it right now, walking into this movie, I did not have very much expectations. Like, my expectations were pretty much on the ground, because I pretty much knew what I was gonna get with this movie, which is a very dumb and silly movie that didn't take itself too seriously, that was just basically like a big comic book, like a big 90s Saturday morning cartoon, and I just knew it. Like, I knew it from the trailers. You watch the trailers for this movie and you go, this is very much just meant to be a fun movie, you know? This movie is not meant to be taken seriously. It is simply just an excuse to make people laugh and keep people entertained for about 2 hours. And personally, I think this movie succeeded wonderfully. This movie was a lot of freaking fun, but I do obviously want to say that this movie isn't very good from a film point of view. But to be completely honest, were you really expecting anything else, to be honest? Like, were you really expecting this movie to be like the next big thing? No. We only strike gold like that very few times, and I think -1 is the odd exception, because this movie is very much what I just described. A very silly, very cheesy movie that I did have a lot of fun with, and I'm going to talk about right now, starting off with the action sequences. In terms of style, they're really nothing special. Like, you know, you don't get any crazy angles or anything, but what they really do well in this movie is giving you these really great wide shots where they just show you these monsters fight. That's what you're here for. You're here to see the monsters fight, and I think in this movie, they did an amazing job at making these scenes feel epic and exhilarating and just a blast. They were so much goddamn fun, especially when it came to the ones with Kong. Kong in particular in this movie, I think, was a really big highlight. I've always really liked the character of Kong, even though I am a Godzilla fanboy. Like, how could you really not be a fan of him? He's just a big funny monkey. Like, honestly, there's nothing really to hate. Like, Kong is just a good character, and a lot of the action scenes revolving around him in this movie are just freaking awesome. I actually think that most of the action, for the most part, is really good in this movie, especially closer to the end of the movie, where it just decides to go off the walls fucking crazy. It just doesn't care about anything. It's just like, whatever, we're just gonna make a really fun movie and a really cool action sequence. It is so crazy, the level that this movie goes closer to the end, and just how absurd it is. But it really adds to it. Like, you can really tell that they just didn't care. They didn't want to make this movie serious at all. They just wanted you to have a fun-ass time and watch these monsters do some crazy shit. Which leads into my next point, which this movie is unapologetically goofy. It is so friggin' funny to watch. Like, nothing makes sense. I do want to say right now, like, the plot, it's out the window. Like, it really does not matter. The main thing that matters in this movie is you having fun, and I think this movie does it masterfully. It knows what it is. It's not trying to be this big serious movie like -1, or even something maybe like Skull Island, which a lot of people might be a little disappointed at. This movie is just, it doesn't care. And if you can shut your brain off, I think you can have a lot of fun with this movie, like an extreme amount of fun. And I know a lot of people are going to bring up, well, does that make it a good movie? No, like, it really doesn't, and I'm going to talk about that later. But from an entertainment point of view, and a point of view of how much fun I had while watching, I'd easily give this movie like a 9 out of 10 to a 10 out of 10. Like, it's a lot of freaking fun to watch. You just have to be in a certain mindset while watching this movie. And that mindset is not giving a fuck and just shutting your brain off and just saying, screw it, we don't care. I don't care about a plot. Let's just watch these monsters fight, and if you don't like that, you're gonna friggin' hate this movie. It's just how it is. But moving away from the more obvious stuff like the action sequences, there was another thing that I really wanted to talk about in terms of something that I really liked about this movie, that I was actually quite surprised with, and that's how they deal with Kong's character in this movie. Because in this movie, when you're with Kong, and when you're basically living his life, it's completely silent. Like, he doesn't talk, there's no captions or subtitles, you're just watching Kong go by his, like, regular, everyday activities. And I actually thought the way they did it in the movie was actually really, really great, where they actually showed a lot of character development with Kong himself, where you can see he's lonely, you can see he's all by himself down there, and he's really just wanting to find more creatures that are like him. And going even further into that idea, I also loved Kong's relationship with this brand new character, Zuko, in this movie, which if you don't know from the trailer, he is a baby ape that finds Kong closer to the middle of the movie, and basically Kong starts to see Zuko as a child to him, and Zuko, slowly throughout the movie, starts to see Kong as more of a parental figure. And I think what they did with that storyline in particular in this movie was really great. Like, I really just want to say, I really like that aspect in the movie. It's basically just Kratos and Atreus from God of War, which is hilarious. Like, there's even a part in the movie where Kong is literally holding this battle axe like Kratos does in the games. But I really love their relationship in the movie. It's very wholesome, it's very cute, and I just loved this funny little monkey who didn't like Kong at first, and he did some despicable things, which if you've seen the movie you know, that I still find funny, and I will always find funny. But even though that's all good, we still do need to talk about the bad things about this movie, which I very much highlighted it at the beginning of this video, but if you're looking for a movie that has a consistent plot, and a plot that really makes sense and makes it feel like, you know, an actual movie, this probably isn't your movie to watch. Like, don't do it. Because to be honest, the plot in this movie really doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and that's coming from a point of view of what's going on with our monster characters and the human characters. But really quickly, I do want to talk about those human characters and get this out of the way super quick, saying they're awful in this movie. That subplot with the humans is just bad. I don't understand why it's so difficult for people to actually be able to write human characters in these MonsterVerse movies. Like, it feels impossible. Even though it really shouldn't be as hard as it seems. Like, we've had good characters that are humans in these movies before. Like, as an example, in the very first Godzilla movie, Bryan Cranston's character, who I actually thought was one of the best parts about that movie. His performance made the beginning of that movie tolerable. And another example you could look at is the characters from Skull Island, which I honestly thought are okay. Like, I don't think those characters are bad. I can't remember their names, but they gave them personalities that I actually could care about. But in this movie, they are suck. Like, I'm gonna be honest, they are not great. It's just the way they're written, they get no development, and they're crammed into this plot, and I understand why they're there. It just felt like something that was thrown in because we have to have human characters in the movie so people can relate with someone, even though you could have just easily done that with Kong, but whatever the hell, whatever. But moving away from characters, another thing I did really want to talk about is the pacing in this movie. I was fully invested the entire time, I was entertained, I was not bored. But I do want to address it, because I did certainly feel some of it, is that this movie getting started, and the first two halves of this movie, are actually pretty slow. Like, not a whole lot actually happens. Like, the third act, it goes completely crazy, and it's the most entertaining thing ever. But leading up to that, there's really not a whole lot. Like, you don't even meet Scar King, the main villain in the movie, till like halfway through the movie. Like, it's really strange in terms of how they actually pace the movie out, and I can actually see people being bored in this movie, which I've heard some people say, no, like, you can't be bored. And I personally wasn't bored, but I can definitely see how someone would say that. Like, the first two halves of this movie are just incredibly slow for, like, no reason, to be honest. But moving on to my next point, I also really did want to talk about the villain of this movie, who is Scar King, if you don't know, who is this tyrant leader of all these great apes in Hollow Earth. And to be completely honest, I didn't love his character throughout the movie. The marketing really made it feel like this character was going to be, like, a huge threat. Like, they were pretty much hyping this guy up to be, like, the most dangerous creature in the MonsterVerse, besides like Ghidorah and Godzilla. But I really did not get that in this movie. Like, he's cool. Like, he's got some really good moments, and I do understand what they were going for in terms of how he is so dangerous and why he is such a big threat, but it largely doesn't even actually have to do anything to do with him. Like, he's just kind of like the one pulling the strings, and I'm not going to say anything past that because that'll be spoiling it, but just take that into account. This character isn't really that big of a threat, and I didn't really feel that in the movie. There was never a time where I was actually intimidated thinking that Godzilla was going to die or like Kong was going to die when they were facing this guy. I felt absolutely no tension when our main title stars were going up against this guy. And also, I gotta say, what the hell did they do to Godzilla in this movie? Because, listen, I am a Godzilla fan. The movie is called Godzilla X Kong, The New Empire. They're both in the title. Godzilla, honestly, is kind of barely in this movie. Like, he's technically present throughout the entire movie, but the most they'll show you is like 15-second sequences where he's like beating up a monster, or he's doing something, or he's hibernating. Like, there's a lot of hibernating in this movie. And coming from a huge Godzilla fan, I was really hoping that they would find a way to space out the Godzilla scenes and the Kong scenes a lot better and make them feel like they're both the protagonists, because Godzilla honestly just doesn't feel like a big part of this movie. He honestly feels just kind of thrown in so Kong can stand somewhat of a chance against this big threat. And don't get me wrong, he's cool in the movie, like he has some good moments, but that actually does lead in something else I really wanted to say, and that is I don't like how they actually treat him in terms of his action sequences in this movie, because Godzilla, in my mind, and I think a lot of people's minds, is a tank. He's not sprinting all over the place, he's not running all over the place, he's not like jumping up and down, you know, he's planting himself like a tree and he's taking some damage and he's gonna kick some ass. But in this movie, I don't like how they make him run all the time. Like, I don't understand what it is with these American Godzilla movies with making Godzilla just like really fast for no reason. Like, I understand that you want to give him a chance to stack up with some of the other monsters in this movie, but does he really need to like sprint full speed? Like, really? Like, don't get me wrong, seeing the one shot of him and Kong running, that is pretty cool. Like, don't get me wrong. But, like, I don't like what they do with him in terms of him just, like, full-on sprinting at people. Like, he literally does a wrestling move in this movie. Like, and I'm not even joking, and I don't want to say when it happens, but it does happen, and I just wasn't a fan of it. I don't like it when they portray Godzilla in that way, and I understand it's cool to have different interpretations of the character, like that's absolutely fine, but personally, I don't love the way they did it in this movie. I think it was a little bit too much for my taste. So for taking all the information that I just said, the good and the bad, and mixing them all together, and basing this off of a movie, not my enjoyment, a movie, a complete package, I'd have to give this movie about a 6 to a 5 out of 10, but I'm gonna say a 6 out of 10 for this video. This movie is a lot of fun, it's very entertaining, it's got some really good action sequences, I love everything they did with Kong and his side of the story, I thought that was all great, but unfortunately we do get a really boring human subplot, and Godzilla doesn't feel like he's nearly as intimidating or present in this movie. He should have been a bigger part of it, and he's just not in this movie, and that's really unfortunate. This movie actually seems very polarizing to people on the internet, and I'm actually very interested to see just how many people love this movie and how many people hate this movie. I'm genuinely very curious, so if you want to leave your opinion down below in the comments, I would be more than glad to read it. I love reading comments from you guys. But anyways, if you like this video, please like and subscribe down below for more content on the channel coming pretty damn soon, and I'm gonna see you on the next one. See ya.